My name is Jennifer Barton. I'm 29 years old, and for 3 years, I thought I had finally found the kind of love that people write about in novels. The quiet, steady kind that feels less like fireworks and more like a warm light left on in the hallway, constant, dependable, always there when you needed it. At least that's what I believed. Adrian and I had been inseparable since college. He was the adventurous one, spontaneous to the point of reckless. He'd wake me up at 2 a.m. just to drive 3 hours for pancakes at some diner he'd read about online. Meanwhile, I was the planner, the one who paid bills on time, kept our calendars organized, and made sure there was enough coffee in the cupboard every Monday morning. People always said we balanced each other out. He made my life less predictable, and I made his life less chaotic. We had our rituals, too. Thursday night was takeout night, usually cheap noodles or fried rice eaten straight out of the carton while we laughed at some obscure documentary only we found fascinating. Sundays I'd cook and he'd sit in the kitchen pretending to help while secretly just stealing bites of food and telling stories. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. I even had a ring hidden away in my sock drawer, a simple sapphire set in silver, elegant, timeless, like the kind of future I thought we were building. I was planning to propose to him at a cabin I'd secretly booked for the winter holidays. I'd imagined the fire-crackling snow falling softly outside and his surprised face as I slipped the ring on his finger. I had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in my head. But sometimes life has a cruel sense of timing. The months leading up to that night, I started to feel something was off. Adrian was distracted, his phone never far from his hand. He'd laugh at messages he didn't share, flip the screen face down whenever I entered the room. When I asked, he brushed it off. Just my boss. Just a friend. You worry too much, Jennifer. I'm not the jealous type. I've always thought trust is the foundation of everything, and I wanted to trust him. So I let it go. I told myself he was stressed that I was imagining it, that our foundation was too strong to crack over something so small. Then came that night. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was in the kitchen, stirring my spaghetti bolognese, my signature dish. Adrian was sprawled on the couch with his laptop supposedly working. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the apartment cozy, familiar, safe. Then his phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't mean to look. It was instinct the sound drew my eyes. For just a split second, the screen lit up, and I saw the name Leo. The message preview burned itself into my brain. Can't wait for you to come over tonight. It's going to be a long night for both of us. My hand froze around the wooden spoon. The sauce bubbled, hissing like it was mocking me. My heartbeat was so loud I could hear it in my ears. I walked into the living room, my body moving before my mind caught up. Adrian looked up, startled by my silence. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just held out my hand and asked in a voice I barely recognized as my own. Adrian, who is Leo? His face drained, then shifted into something uglier. Not guilt, not remorse. Panic quickly masked by irritation. He fumbled for his phone, but it was too late. I'd seen enough. When he finally spoke, his words sliced cleaner than any knife. Jesus, relax, Jennifer. You're overreacting. We're not married. I don't owe you loyalty. Just like that. Cold, casual, as if 3 years of shared laughter, promises, and dreams could be shrugged off like a coat that no longer fit him. I stared at him, waiting foolishly, desperately for him to take it back to laugh and say it was a mistake. Instead, he crossed his arms and smirked the same way he looked at one of his paintings he thought was genius. Something inside me broke, or maybe it hardened. I couldn't tell. In that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man I thought I'd spend my life with, but a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a placeholder until something better came along. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, I turned, walked back into the kitchen, and quietly switched off the stove. The smell of my cooking, once so comforting, now felt suffocating, a ghost of a life already gone. I went to the bedroom, pulled out my duffel bag, and began to pack. My movements were steady, mechanical, as though I'd been rehearsing this all along. A sweater, a pair of jeans, my toothbrush, not much else. When Adrian finally followed me into the room, his expression had shifted from smug to annoyed, like I was inconveniencing him. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him words any more than he owed me loyalty. I zipped up the bag, picked up my keys and wallet, and walked past him. Past the life I thought we had. Past the lies, past the man who had just killed every memory we'd built. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. I just closed it softly like sealing a coffin and stepped into the night. The air outside was colder than I expected, sharp against my skin. My car sat under the dim streetlight, and as I slid into the driver's seat, a strange stillness settled over me. No tears, no anger, just silence. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring past me, until I found myself at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters flickering. I paid cash for a room, went inside, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. That's when it hit me. My life, the one I'd so carefully planned, the one I thought was solid and safe, had been ripped away with a single sentence. "We're not married? I don't owe you loyalty." His words echoed in my mind, each repetition stripping away another layer of the love I once felt. And as I sat there in that silent, unfamiliar room, I realized something terrifying. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been naive, believing loyalty came without conditions, believing love was enough. But if he thought I would crumble, if he thought his betrayal would leave me begging for scraps, he didn't know me at all. That night, in the stillness of that motel, a new Jennifer began to take shape. A colder one, a stronger one. One who would never again mistake stability for love or silence for safety. And Adrian, he had no idea what kind of ghost he had just created. The motel room was the kind of place you forget as soon as you leave: beige walls, thin curtains, and a bed that creaked when you sat on it. But that night, it became my cocoon. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the pillow or throw things across the room. Instead, I just sat there staring at my duffel bag lying open on the chair, half packed, half forgotten. The silence pressed down on me so heavily that even the hum of the old air conditioner sounded like thunder. I had always thought heartbreak would come with drama, shattered glass, tear-streaked cheeks, maybe even some cinematic collapse on the floor. But what I felt was nothing, just stillness. It scared me more than anger ever could. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, my body stiff from a night of restless sleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. Adrian. Maybe an apology, maybe another smug dismissal. Either way, I wasn't ready to let his voice crawl into this fragile quiet I'd built. Instead, I called someone else. "Maya," I whispered when she answered, my throat raw. Her voice sharpened, instantly cutting through the static. "Jennifer." "What happened?" I swallowed hard, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling. "It's over. With Adrian. I'll explain later. I need your help to get my things." There was no hesitation, no flood of questions, just one word. "Where?" That was Maya. Steady as a rock, though she'd kill me if I used that word. She hated cliches, said they made real emotions sound like bad poetry. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown in an hour. I didn't even bother showering. I just pulled my hair into a knot, threw on yesterday's sweater, and walked out of the motel. The early morning air was damp, carrying the faint scent of rain. It felt like the world was washing itself clean while I was still coated in something I couldn't scrub off. When I walked into the coffee shop, Maya was already there. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Her eyes scanned me, the duffel bag, the exhaustion stamped on my face, and I saw the understanding click into place without a word. "Let's go," she said simply. On the drive back to the apartment, I rehearsed what I might see Adrian pacing in the living room, ready with excuses or accusations. My chest tightened, but when we pulled up, his car wasn't there. Relief and disappointment tangled together in my stomach. The apartment felt foreign as soon as I unlocked the door. The faint aroma of last night's bolognese still lingered in the air, turning my stomach. My shoes were still by the door. My scarf was still draped over the couch. It looked like home, but it wasn't anymore. I moved quickly, methodically. Clothes into boxes, books stacked neatly, my old jewelry tools dusty, but still there, packed carefully into a bag. Each item felt like I was pulling pieces of myself out of a life that had rejected me. Maya carried boxes without asking questions, though. I caught her eyes flicker once to the dresser. She must have noticed the sock drawer slightly ajar, the one with the ring inside. I didn't touch it. That sapphire ring didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to a version of myself who still believed Adrian was worth a future. That woman was gone. After an hour, the apartment looked hollow. My things were stripped away, leaving behind his chaos, his scattered notebooks, his paintings propped against the wall, his half-drunk coffee mug still on the counter. I felt like an intruder in someone else's space. When the last box was in Maya's truck, she turned to me. "Jennifer, do you want to leave him a note? Closure or something?" I shook my head. My throat ached, but my voice came out steady. "No, he said everything himself. I don't owe him a word." We slammed the truck door shut, the sound echoing like punctuation. The ride to Maya's place was quiet. She didn't push. That was her gift, knowing when silence was kinder than words. She offered me her spare room for as long as I needed. I accepted without hesitation. That night, lying in her guest bed, surrounded by boxes of my life, the numbness still clung to me. I kept expecting the dam to break. Tears, rage, grief. But all I felt was that same unsettling stillness. It wasn't peace. It was something sharper, heavier, like ice settling deep into my bones. And yet somewhere beneath that ice, a spark flickered. A thought so faint I almost missed it. If Adrian thought he had broken me, he was wrong. He had freed me. I wasn't ready to believe it yet, but I would. Because that night, staring at the ceiling in Maya's spare room, I promised myself one thing: I would never again let someone confuse loyalty with ownership. Adrian might have chosen chaos over me, but I would choose something else entirely. Myself. The first week after leaving Adrian felt like being trapped in a fog. Days blurred together, my body going through motions while my mind drifted somewhere far away. I called in sick to work, ate whatever Maya shoved in front of me, slept too much and not at all in the same breath. But little by little, the fog began to thin. It started with a drawer. Maya's spare room had an old nightstand scratched its handles loose, one drawer stuck halfway. Out of boredom, I sat on the floor one afternoon prying at it with a butter knife until it creaked open. Inside, I found nothing but dust and a forgotten button. Still, there was a strange satisfaction in the act. Fixing something broken, restoring it to what it was meant to be. That night, I dug out my old jewelry tools from one of the boxes. Tools I hadn't touched since Adrian convinced me there wasn't time for hobbies if I wanted to build a serious life with him. My fingers ached with memory as I polished the brass knob until it gleamed. It was small, almost pathetic, but for the first time since leaving, I felt like myself. Silence became my armor. Adrian texted? Of course, at first casual. How are you? Then more pointed. I miss you. Can we talk? Finally desperate, Leo isn't who I thought. You're the only one who understands me. I read them, I deleted them, I never replied. The absence of my response must have cut deeper than any furious outburst. He was used to my steadiness, my reliability, my willingness to smooth over his chaos. When I vanished, I left a void, and voids have a way of swallowing people whole. But it wasn't just Adrian who betrayed me. It was Serena. Serena and I had been friends since college. She was fiery, unapologetic, the kind of woman who thrived on drama. Adrian adored her. Energy always said she reminded him of the part of me you don't have. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. A few weeks after I left, I ran into her at a wine bar with Maya. She looked surprised to see me surprised. And guilty. That expression alone made my skin prickle. Jennifer, she said too brightly, kissing the air near my cheek. I've been meaning to call you. Have you? I asked evenly, sipping my wine. Her smile faltered. Listen about Adrian. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe it wasn't serious with Leo, and I didn't want to get in the middle. Her words tangled, tripping over each other, but the truth was already clear. She knew. She'd known. She had watched me cook dinners, plan trips, dream out loud about a proposal, all while Adrian was sneaking around with Leo. And she said nothing. It felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. Adrian had broken my heart. Serena had stolen my dignity by staying silent. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You didn't protect me. You protected him. Don't pretend it was anything else. Her face flushed, but she didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just looked down into her glass, swirling the wine like it might swallow her whole. That was the last time we spoke. That night, back at Maya's apartment, I couldn't sleep. The silence pressed in on me again, but this time it wasn't numb. It was sharp, clarifying. Adrian and Serena thought they'd erased me with their carelessness, but what they didn't understand was that silence is not emptiness. Silence can be louder than rage, heavier than grief. Silence can be survival. I didn't rage on social media. I didn't send long texts or demand explanations. I became a ghost in their lives, and ghosts don't play by the rules of the living. Instead, I poured myself into the work of my hands. I started restoring old furniture Maya picked up at flea markets, a chipped oak chair, a rusted lamp, a cracked porcelain box. Each object felt like a metaphor for me, broken, discarded, underestimated. Piece by piece, I brought them back to life, and in turn, piece by piece, I brought myself back too. One evening, as I polished the last edge of a cherrywood jewelry box, I realized I hadn't thought about Adrian in hours. Not his texts, not his smug voice, not even his betrayal. For the first time since the night I walked out, he wasn't the center of my story. I was, and that terrified me, because it meant I had to start asking questions I'd avoided in the stillness. Who was I without him? What did I want beyond the life I'd tried to build around him? The answers didn't come all at once. They came like whispers, like the faint gleam of polished wood under my hands. I wanted to create. I wanted to breathe. I wanted to choose myself without apology. And if that meant becoming a ghost in Adrian's world, so be it. Because ghosts are untouchable. Adrian had always been the loud one between us. The talker, the dreamer, the man who could spin a story out of thin air and charm a room into believing it. For 3 years, I had been the listener, the quiet anchor holding him steady while he chased sparks. So when my silence stretched on for weeks, I think it unsettled him more than if I had screamed. The text escalated first. Hey, remember our Saturday nights, just us bad movies, too much popcorn? Leo's not who I thought he was. He's a mess. I made a mistake. Please, Jennifer, just one call. We can fix this. Each one was like a stone thrown into a well. They made ripples for a moment, then vanished into the depths. I read them, deleted them, felt nothing. Then the voicemails began. I listened to the first one out of morbid curiosity. His voice cracked in places I'd never heard before, raw and shaky. Jennifer, it's me. Please, just pick up. I know I hurt you, but I can explain. Leo. He lied to me. He used me. I don't even know who he is anymore. You're the only one who ever really knew me. You're my... He stopped short before finishing the word. I could almost hear it hovering there, unsaid anchor. The same word he'd once used to dismiss me. The next messages came at odd hours, his voice slurring like he'd been drinking. Sometimes he was angry, demanding, sometimes pitiful, begging. Each one stripped away a little more of the confident man I thought I knew. But none of it moved me. Instead, every voicemail reminded me of that one sentence that had killed everything between us. We're not married. I don't owe you loyalty. His words had been my mirror, showing me the truth I hadn't wanted to see. Now my silence was his mirror, reflecting back the emptiness he had left me with. And that mirror was merciless. It wasn't just Adrian reaching out, though. One evening, my phone buzzed. With a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jennifer, it's Mrs. Reyes. Adrian's mother. My throat tightened. I'd always liked her a warm woman with kind eyes who used to insist on sending us home with leftovers whenever we visited. Hello, I said cautiously. There was a pause, then a sigh. I'm sorry to call like this, but Adrian's not well. He won't talk to me, won't eat. He's falling apart. I know things ended badly, but you were good for him. You kept him grounded. I closed my eyes. Her voice carried so much desperation, so much maternal worry, but her words twisted inside me. You kept him grounded. You were his anchor. The same script from a different mouth. Mrs. Reyes, I said softly, steadying my breath, I understand you're worried, but Adrian made his choices, and I made mine. He made a mistake, she pleaded. People make mistakes. You can't just throw away 3 years of love. I cut her off sharper than I meant to. He already did. There was silence on the other end, heavy and stunned. Then a small, broken whisper. You're right. I ended the call, my hands trembling not from doubt, but from the cold weight of finality. That night, I stared at my reflection in Maya's bathroom mirror. My eyes looked hollow, my skin pale, but my gaze was steady. I thought about Adrian unraveling without me, about Serena silent when I needed her, about all the ways people I trusted had failed me. And yet I didn't feel powerless. For the first time, I realized the silence I carried was not emptiness, it was control. Adrian wanted me to scream, to argue, to fight, because fighting meant I still cared. Fighting meant he still mattered. But silence meant he was irrelevant. My stillness was his undoing. It was the mirror he could not bear to look into because it showed him exactly what he was disposable, just as he had once tried to make me feel. I pressed my palms flat against the cold sink and whispered to my reflection, You don't owe him loyalty. Not anymore. And for the first time, the words didn't sting. They set me free. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in a cafe not far from Maya's apartment, sipping my coffee, while flipping through an old book I'd picked up from a flea market. The windows fogged with condensation rain sliding down in uneven trails, the world outside blurred and distant. For once I felt calm. Then a shadow fell across my table. I looked up and there he was, Adrian. His once carefully styled hair was unkempt, Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and his clothes looked as though he had slept in them. He didn't look like the man who had smirked at me with such cruel confidence weeks ago. He looked smaller, hollowed out. "Jennifer," he whispered, like my name was a prayer and a curse all at once. My chest tightened, not with longing, not with anger, but with something heavier, pity. "Adrian," I replied flatly, closing my book. "I'm busy." He slid into the seat across from me anyway, rain dripping from his jacket pooling on the floor. His hands trembled as he clasped them together on the table. "Please just listen. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to hear me." I didn't answer. The silence stretched, pressing down on him until he fidgeted, unable to bear it. "I messed up," he blurted out. His voice cracked. "Leo, he used me. He cheated on me with Serena. You were right about everything. I was an idiot, and I've been paying for it every single day since you walked out that door." Serena. Hearing her name again sent a flicker of heat through my chest, but I kept my face still, my eyes steady. Adrian leaned forward, desperation spilling from every movement. "I'm not asking for you to take me back. I know I don't deserve that. I need you in my life, even as a friend, just to talk. You're the only person who ever understood me. You were my—" He stopped himself, the word caught in his throat, but I knew what it was. Anchor. Rock. The crutch he thought he could lean on forever. I stared at him for a long moment, watching the rain drip from his hair, his chest rise and fall too quickly. Then I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Do you remember what you told me, Adrian, that night?" His eyes flickered with panic. "Jennifer, you said we're not married. I don't owe you loyalty." He flinched, the words hitting him like a slap. I leaned forward now, my voice steady as stone. "So here's my answer, Adrian. You're right. We weren't married. And I don't owe you loyalty." The cafe went quiet around us. Even the rain seemed to hush. His mouth opened, then closed, like he was struggling to breathe. "I was stupid," he whispered, his eyes glassy. "I didn't mean it." "But you did," I cut in. "You meant every word. You showed me who you were, and I finally believed you." His face crumpled, desperation breaking into something raw, something almost childlike. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing the back of my hand. Once that touch would have melted me. Now it felt like ice. I pulled my hand away. "You killed us, Adrian," I said quietly. "You killed the woman who would have forgiven you. You don't get to come crawling back to her. She's gone. I buried her the night I left." Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks unchecked. For the first time I realized he wasn't performing. This wasn't an act or manipulation. This was Adrian, stripped bare, broken. But it didn't change a thing. I stood slipping my bag over my shoulder. He looked up at me with a kind of wild hope, like maybe I'd reconsider, maybe I'd reach down and offer him a lifeline. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye. "You said you didn't owe me loyalty. And now, Adrian, I don't owe you love, or friendship, or forgiveness. I owe you nothing." I walked away, my footsteps steady, the door chiming softly as I left. Behind me, I could still hear him calling my name, but the sound was muffled by the rain fading into background noise. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, the storm already beginning to pass. I breathed it in deeply, filling my lungs with something that felt startlingly close to freedom. For the first time in months, I didn't feel haunted. I felt released. Adrian's shadow no longer clung to me. It stayed behind in that cafe, small and crumpled, staring into the mirror of my silence. And I kept walking into the life he would never touch again. Life didn't change overnight. I didn't wake up the morning after confronting Adrian with sunshine in my veins and a brand new identity. Healing is slower, quieter than that. It comes in fragments, moments you almost miss, until you realize they've stitched themselves into something whole. For me, it started with wood. Maya spotted an old jewelry box at a yard sale. Its hinges were rusted, its varnish peeling, and one of its little drawers stuck halfway. She bought it for $3, dropped it on my desk, and said, "Fix this, or throw it out, whatever helps." It took me 2 weeks. 2 weeks of sanding, polishing, replacing screws, and rubbing oil into the grain until the wood gleamed again. When I slid the drawer open without resistance, I laughed, a sound that startled me. I hadn't heard it in months. That laugh was worth more than the $3 box. Soon people started noticing. Maya's cousin asked if I could restore an antique chair. A neighbor dropped off a lamp with a cracked base. Word spread in small, careful ripples. Before long, my weekends were filled with sawdust and varnish, my hands calloused and steady. For the first time, I wasn't someone's anchor. I was building something that was mine. And slowly, the ache that had lived in my chest began to loosen. Adrian's calls eventually stopped. His shadow still lingered at the edges of my mind, but it was faint now, like smoke dissipating in the air. Serena remained silent too. I didn't miss either of them. Instead, I found myself surrounded by new voices. Friends I hadn't seen in years reappeared in my life, drawn by the fact that I finally had time for them again. Maya dragged me to art exhibits, to weekend hikes, to late-night drives, just for the thrill of singing old songs with the windows down. And then there was Johnny. I met him at a friend's birthday party. He wasn't flashy. No booming laugh, no dramatic gestures. He was a teacher, quiet but warm, with a dry wit that slipped out in perfectly timed one-liners. When we talked, I felt like he was listening. Really listening, not just waiting for his turn to speak. It unnerved me at first. I wasn't looking for anyone. My guard was high, my walls freshly built, but Johnny didn't try to scale them. He just waited at the gate, patient, curious, never pushing. Our first real date was simple coffee and a walk in the park. We talked about everything and nothing. Books, childhood memories, the kind of students who drive teachers insane. He asked about my restoration work, and instead of dismissing it as a hobby, he leaned in fascinated. By the time the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, I realized I hadn't thought about Adrian once. That realization frightened me, but it also thrilled me. One night, weeks later, Johnny came over for dinner. I decided to make spaghetti bolognese, the same meal I'd been cooking the night my world had collapsed. As I stirred the sauce, the familiar smell filled the kitchen. For a moment, a flash of memory tried to intrude Adrian's smirk, his phone lighting up with Leo's name. But then Johnny's phone buzzed on the counter. It was face up the screen, lighting clearly. A message from a friend about a new book recommendation. Johnny picked it up, chuckled, typed a quick reply, and set it back down. No secrecy, no hiding, no shame. And in that moment, something inside me eased. I realized I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't bracing for betrayal. The smell of garlic and tomatoes no longer carried pain. It carried peace. When I looked at Johnny, really looked, I saw kindness etched in his smile, steadiness in his eyes. He wasn't looking for an anchor. He wasn't asking for me to fix him, to save him, to carry his weight. He just wanted to sit across the table from me and share a meal. For the first time, I felt what partnership was supposed to be. After dinner, we sat on the couch, laughing at some silly video on his phone. My head rested on his shoulder, and the thought struck me like a revelation. This is what safety feels like. Not silence, not stillness, not numbness, but trust. And I hadn't realized how starved I was for it until it was right there in front of me. Later that night, as Johnny left, he paused at the door. "Jennifer," he said softly, "I like who you are. Not what you do for me, not what you give me, just you." His words lingered long after he was gone. They clung to me in the quiet wrapping around me like a promise I never knew I needed. For so long, Adrian had convinced me I was valuable only as his stability, that my worth was measured in what I could fix for him. But Johnny saw me not as a lifeline, not as an anchor, just as Jennifer. And for the first time since I walked out of that apartment, I believed I could be more than someone's shadow. I could be my own light. Months slipped by, carrying me further from the night I walked out of that apartment with a duffel bag and a hollow chest. The pain that once felt like a knife now lived in me as something softer, like a faded scar, visible but no longer bleeding. Adrian was gone from my life. Serena, too. I hadn't heard from either in weeks, maybe months, and I didn't want to. The silence between us had grown into a canyon, and I had no desire to build a bridge. Instead, my world became full of new rhythms. Mornings spent with coffee and sandpaper, afternoons varnishing wood while sunlight streamed through the blinds, evenings, with Maya laughing about nothing and everything. And sometimes Johnny's quiet presence, steady, warm, and honest, woven into my days like a thread I hadn't known I was missing. One afternoon, as I worked on a delicate project, an old sapphire necklace someone had brought me to restore, I felt the air shift. The gemstone, cloudy from years of neglect, caught the light after hours of careful polishing, glowing deep blue in my palm. The sight stopped me. It reminded me of the sapphire ring I had once hidden in my sock drawer, the one I'd left behind, the one meant for a man who told me loyalty was optional. I had abandoned that ring, but here was another sapphire not meant for a promise that would never be kept, but for rebirth. My chest tightened, then eased. It wasn't pain. It was something else. Gratitude. Not for Adrian, not for Serena, but for myself, for walking away, for refusing to fight for someone who had already discarded me, for choosing silence instead of self-destruction. I realized then that Adrian's betrayal had not defined me. It had revealed me. If he hadn't lied, if Serena hadn't stayed silent, I might have continued living in that half-life, mistaking routine for happiness, mistaking endurance for love. I would never have dug out my old tools, never felt the joy of creating something with my own hands, never looked across a table at Johnny, and known what trust truly felt like. It wasn't that I forgave them. Forgiveness wasn't necessary. What I found was something stronger in difference. They had no power over me anymore. Later that evening, as I closed the clasp of the restored necklace, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see the woman who had begged for scraps of affection, who had doubted her worth because of someone else's carelessness. I saw a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece as carefully as she restored the broken things on her desk. I whispered to the mirror, the words carrying no bitterness, only truth. You're not someone's anchor anymore. You're your own. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was full of laughter, of late-night walks of sawdust and varnish, of sapphire light glinting against polished wood. For the first time, my story wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had gained. And in that realization, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. The kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but steady and certain. The kind that doesn't ask permission, doesn't demand loyalty. The kind that simply is. I looked down at the necklace one last time before returning it to its velvet box, a symbol of restoration, of beauty born from care, not chaos. And I smiled. Adrian was a footnote, Serena a shadow. Their choices had shaped me, yes, but they no longer defined me. The woman who once cooked spaghetti bolognese while waiting for a proposal that would never come was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone quieter, someone finally alive. I had learned the hardest truth sometimes. Betrayal is not the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the one you were meant to write. And mine was only just beginning. It's strange how life circles back. A year after I walked out of that apartment, I found myself in another cabin. Not the one I'd once booked for a proposal that would never happen, but a different one tucked away in the mountains, snow falling outside, just as I had once imagined. Only this time, I wasn't waiting for someone's approval to make my life complete. I was sitting by the fire with Johnny, a mug of tea warming my hands, his quiet presence beside me, like a steady heartbeat. He was reading his glasses slipping down his nose, and every now and then he'd glance at me with that small smile of his, the one that said, I see you, not the version you perform, just you. And that was enough. There was no ring hidden away this time, no rehearsed speeches or desperate timelines, just two people building something simple, honest, and free. At one point, I set my mug down and opened the velvet box I'd brought with me. Inside lay the restored sapphire necklace. The gem glowed in the firelight deep blue like frozen ocean water. Johnny looked up. That's beautiful. I smiled faintly. It was broken when I got it. Took weeks to bring it back. He closed his book and leaned closer, studying the way the sapphire caught the light. Funny thing about broken things, he said softly. Sometimes when you mend them, they end up stronger, more beautiful than before. I swallowed hard because he didn't know how much those words meant. He didn't know that I wasn't just holding a necklace. I was holding a piece of myself polished and reborn. I clasped it around my neck, feeling the cool weight settle against my skin. For a moment, the ghost of that old sapphire ring flickered in my memory, the one I'd left behind in Adrian's drawer, abandoned, like our future. But instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Not for him, but for the lessons he had forced me to learn. Without his betrayal, I might never have discovered what I was capable of. I might never have picked up my tools again, never have rebuilt a life from the fragments of one I thought was unshakable. I might never have realized that the silence I once feared was my greatest strength. And I might never have found Johnny. The fire crackled. Snow tapped gently against the windows. I touched the sapphire at my collarbone and whispered to myself almost like a prayer, You are not his anchor. You are your own light. And in that moment, I knew I was free. Adrian's memory had finally become what it deserved to be: background noise, a ghost fading into irrelevance. I didn't hate him. I didn't miss him. I didn't even wonder about him anymore. He was simply a lesson, a chapter I had closed. What remained was my story, my hands, my laughter, my work, my love. The cabin was warm, the sapphire gleamed, and Johnny's hand found mine, steady, unforced, real. I had thought betrayal was the end of me, but it had been the beginning all along. And as the snow fell outside, I felt the truth settle deep into my bones. I hadn't lost, I had won. Because the greatest revenge is not anger or payback. It's living a life so full, so whole, so free that the people who broke you can't even find a place in it anymore. And that was exactly the life I had built.